Father of Isteach go Suantraí Íosa, you're very welcome as we gather to celebrate the readings for tomorrow, the 23rd of August, the feast of St Eugene and St Rose of Lima. Now again, in the notes under the video, we have a commentary on St Eugene and St Rose of Lima. Now, tomorrow's first reading, taken from the second letter of St Paul to the Thessalonians, is very important because it speaks about the brothers and keep to the traditions that we taught you, whether by word or mouth or by written letter. Now, this is very important because it's Paul bearing witness to the fact that revelation is contained in the written scriptures, but also in the oral tradition of the early church, which enhances and helps us to understand in context the sacred scripture. So this passage from St. Paul is very important because, again, I say, revelation is not scripture alone. It's scripture and the oral tradition that has been handed on that the documents of the early church bear witness to. We are enriched by those documents, such as the Didache. They enrich our understanding of Christ. The psalm tomorrow, Psalm 96. With justice the Lord will rule the world. He will judge the peoples with his truth. Now, truth is a very interesting word. We have one understanding of it in the West, but in the context of the sacred scriptures, it stands also for the faithfulness of God. And God is going to judge people through his faithful love. God has made a promise that he will love, and God will always act in love, because that is his nature. He is true to his nature of being love. Then from Matthew 23, we have the sevenfold indictment of the Pharisees. This is a chapter in which Christ gives us a deep insight into what can go wrong in our adherence to religious life. The first part is you could become obsessed with little things like little gnats and missing the wood for the trees around you. So often in life, we become obsessed with keeping little rules and miss the beauty of the gospel. And then he goes on and says that people were so obsessed with appearing to be religious that they were like people who cleaned the outside of the cup and dish and then left the insides full of extortion and intemperance. Now, obviously, Christ is not talking about cups and dishes here, but our hearts, our souls, our very selves, that we need to cleanse ourselves of all corruption. And this is an appeal by Christ that we would use the sacrament of reconciliation and use it well. We have lost our awareness of sin, and yet none of us would be happy to keep going and using a plate that had already had the stains of previous meals on it. And yet we can go months without confession. How long would you go with the stains of previous meals on your plate before you would sicken yourself? In the same way, we need to use the sacrament of reconciliation to ensure that the heart we open up to receive God in the Holy Eucharist and in the sacred scriptures is clean by the grace of God. That's what the sacrament is about. It's cleaned by God's grace. We find God's grace in the sacrament of reconciliation, abundant grace, freely given to cleanse us so that our hearts are ready to encounter God in the scriptures, in the Eucharist, and in one another. With thoughts such as these, let us go to our beds. Let us pray that we shall indeed awaken in the morning with the praise of God on our hearts and on our lips. Agus gemanadia elikoptuk shiv, ahar mak agus spirit nave. Amen. Slán go fóill. And thank you so much for liking and subscribing to Suantraí Íosa. I am delighted to have your company every day, and I include you in my prayers and in my masses. Slán agus beannacht.